welcome to Creative Writing Institute's Write from the Gut number. I don't remember which one it is. I think it's number 18. And thank you for coming. I'm Alexandra Kostulis. I'm the founder and executive director of the San Francisco Creative Writing Institute. We are really excited to have you here and joining us. And this reading is mostly featuring students from our workshops that concluded either December 2021 or just recently in winter 2022. Most of you are students in Hollie Hardy's poetry workshop, also Paul Corman Roberts' workshop, and one student that's in my workshop too. I'm really excited to also invite and host Matthew Zapruder, who is our featured guest poet, one of the poets that Hollie Hardy studied in her contemporary poets and poetry workshop. And yeah, and I just thank you all for coming. I'm going to be listening in the background as you read, and I just wanted to welcome you back. And it's been a pleasure. A lot of you have been to many of our readings throughout the pandemic, and also previously in person. And it's great to see you again, and welcome back.
Thanks, Alexandra. Thanks for coming out, you guys. I'm really excited to be able to hear you all together in celebration of this class that just ended, Poetry 3. For those of you who weren't in the class, Poetry 3, each week we focus on one single poet and we read deeply a whole bunch of their work, and we talk about what that work is doing, and then prompts come out of that so that students can try on their style or try on their themes, and maybe push themselves to try things they wouldn't have done in their work regularly. And it's been really fun for me too, because I've got to go deep into new contemporary poets, not just the old canon, but like what's hot right now, who's really making waves in poetry today. And so this has just been really fun. And Matthew Zapruder is a friend, so it was really nice of him to offer to come and read from his latest book, Father's Day, or whatever he wants to read. But that's what the students read. So we're gonna have him close us out at the end, and we're gonna start with the open mic list. I didn't see Han. Paul, did you see Han? So we're gonna go straight to Tracy Artson. And are you okay? Are you ready to start us out tonight?
Yes, I suppose so. So I'm not sure if this is a final draft of this poem, but I've been working on it for a while. It's called A Girl Learns the World, or What Raising a Daughter Taught Me. I sit down to write and tell you what I know. A child learns the world by putting it in her mouth. A girl becomes a woman, and a woman, earth. Ilya Kaminsky, Deaf Republic. I sit down to read this poem, Ilya, and tell you what I witness. A girl learns the world by the objects forced into her mouth. She swallows precast cherry-coated edibles, trusting it's her choice. Twat revealed miniskirts, nipples poking through the tees in light weaves, cologne-scented whistle shouts, and body slams from Pick the Age Man. To savor in her pocket or on a rope locket with a picture shame-linked desire, clasped shut. Hidden in precious collectible nesting dolls, handed down by a grandmother whose mouth was crowbarred ajar by Pick Your Age Man. A girl learns the world and then it learns her well. A hole with no bottom below for the pebble to hit and bounce off, the water triggering centripetal agony, a perpetual velocity. Two vectors penetrate her soul, leads to pain, leads to detachment. Horizontal lines turn oblique and woolly. She, the girl, is not like Goldilocks porridge. Ouch, too hot. Brr, too cold. Just right. The gruel is always never just right. A girl clasps this world and learns to catwalk for the possessive eye. of pick-your-age man that bore into breasts or ass, cries as she learns the art of magic and metamorphosis, evaporates to gold dust or coal dust to fashion her literal survival, which she must trust, is of her own numinous ancient conjuring. Girl, they will blame you senseless for being too cute and stupid, ugly and smart, skinny until you vanquish anorexic white, round in your curvaceous brown bum, smothering in your love but frigid below, another refrigerator mother to blame for their fill-in-the-blank child. A girl becomes a woman and nothing changes. Men of the city, men mowing lawns, men of the farm, men with no money and men without care, will lay claim and body over XX identified body, enlighten us to keep our babies born of rape and spoil, fist to fistula, as if that is heroic. Mouths will flap and flap. God put you in this moment, the penultimate male challenge, and they don't know if the baby inside will be the next president, may be the next person who changes humanity. Decreed to convince a woman it is her cherry-coated choice to carry that seed barefaced and forced, thrust in a woman's throat, tongue-tied and choked, until all that exists is a deafening roar of seething silence. Just remember, the thunder boom is heard after the lightning bolt strikes.
Wow, that was fantastic. Tracy, I love this this theme you've been circling and corkscrewing into since I've been working with you. This feels like it's really blossomed into something. I'm loving it. It's great. And we're more people are filing in, so we're in good shape here. Riley, who I just found out got another poem published this week. Congrats, Riley O'Connell.
Thanks. I'm going to read that one that just got published, even though I wrote it like a year ago. So it's a cento, and it's called Female. Every year we have been witness to it, a man pouring wine into 2 glasses and a woman sliding out, eyes, lips, tongue like a stack of smoke, body without shoulders, smudged up in fingerprints and in teeth. She is naked, maybe, with a cigarette, a cup of tea, the representation of starvation. Maybe our looking unclothes her, convinces her there is sweeter fruit than her own name. It's true. The Bible didn't prepare me for when a woman tells her own story. America, you may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with anything? You drink gin on the back steps, talk like 2 men do, forever trying to get out of this world, far more than what you put in. What do I owe you? I don't have it to give you. America, spare me, would you, this blinding headache. Don't bring your emotions into this. This is a poem, so don't come here searching for final blessing. You know the trembling is happening silently. You know the magnitude, know how the tune goes, if not the words. How for generations, bodies like mine were the choice for someone like you to make, to say it is gospel, as if that's okay. The trick is, will you just quit looking at yourself? Every day, I'm still looking for God, and I'm still finding him not at all interested in me. Every night, I pray for a lantern in my chest, edicts from a cloudy white beard hooked over ears. But I'm taking the day off. When I'm quiet, that's when the truth emerges. And that's being published Tuesday in Pink Panther magazine. So that's cool. I'll send a link on the Facebook page when that is published.
Congrats again, Riley. I'm so proud of you. You know that. It's awesome. Another prolific and constantly publishing poet of mine. I own you guys. You're mine. You're mine. Valerie Sofer.
Okay, this was my Matthew Zapruder inspired poem, and I'm sorry the class is over. No feedback on this one. Broken circles. Barely gray flipbook sky quickly turns the page to white as bits of drought rain fall. I worry about the neighbor's limping dog. He hobbles past an abandoned blue rubber ball. Weeds camouflage its brightness. Soon it will deflate. I worry about the child who lost the ball, how long it took her to forget. I worry about the rain and why it has forsaken us. But most of all today, I worry about war. I turn on the TV to see suffering undistorted. I tape an episode so I don't miss a thing. Too real to be true, elaborate sets with live bullets. We learn again the language of war. We learn names of cities we didn't know existed. The letter Y where it usually doesn't belong, circled by tanks that never belong. Horror needs no subtitles. Place name Spring Crawl. In a cookie country map someone took a bite out of. Do the names hold the same meaning as ours? Land of oaks, city of breakable angels. We watch war children in subway shelters clutch to their baby chest, stuffed animals and rag dolls with chipped button eyes they have named in their own child language, while missile-shattered shards storm down onto streets strewn with broken halos. The horror is, we'll change channels. I stay up late with the war playing puzzles, distraction technique to help absorb the truth. Explosions in steel gray skies reflect in the glass guitar pick Noguchi table I gripped white-nailed as a toddler learning to walk. Its shape deconstructs the infiniteness of a circle, the illusion of wholeness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That was a really incredible poem. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. Hi, I'm your co-host, Paul Corman Roberts, and Hollie and I will be your alternating hosts for the evening. And one of the reasons for that is because it's really weird to introduce yourself. And so the next person I'm going to introduce is our one and only Hollie Hardy, who I think has been on board with the San Francisco Creative Writing Institute. Is it 8 years now, Hollie?
Yes.
8 years. She's
100.
Yeah, the 100. Well, what it is and what it feels like, of course, is. So I think she is also. I would like to point out the the co-founder of the long-running and still running Saturday Night Special Open Mic Series, which was to this day the best open mic. I think I'll just come out and say it, the best open mic we ever saw in the Bay Area. And I know there's some people who are going to have a problem with that. Certainly, nobody will argue that it was the best in the East Bay. I'm going to go a step further, say it was the best in the Bay Area. And also the author of the award-winning book, How to Take a Bullet and Other Survival Poems, which I am now currently trying to get these linked to in the chat screen, and I will have that there in just a moment. And there it is, and you can check out Hollie's book there. And with no further ado, please give a warm welcome to Hollie Hardy.
Thank you. Let me see if I can spotlight. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to read 3 short poems for you guys, and 2 of them are super new, little dream poems in progress, and then I'll read you one. The last one is from my manuscript Lions Like Us, which I'm putting the final touches on, hoping to find a home for it. So this is Green Onions. One of the characters in my dream had the face of a man, but his body was just a long series of connected bunches of green onions, stretching on and on across the yard. I went to say hello to him. "I'm sorry I haven't called you back," he said. "I've had a lot to deal with lately. I said not to worry because I hadn't called him either, but that we should talk soon. Apparently, we thought fondly of each other. In the dream, I thought to myself how I like a man who doesn't take himself too seriously, but they can be quite funny when they do. All right, this is Night Terror. That night, you walked around the house like a fugitive, glistering in smeary crepuscular light, gathering fire from cracked doorways, willfully forgetting the scissors, dream damage, limestone heartache. In the morning, you walked around the house of monsters, counting the absence of stars, hinged at the belly of drowning. When I say you, what I mean is me. When I say monsters, what I mean is us. And then this one, Sarah Beale just accepted for publication in her anthology, Colossus Freedom, that's coming out soon. So I'm gonna read that one, mainly because I too am thinking about war. Reimagination. I looked up, changed, unbroken by silence. You have become my autobiography in red. A child climbed over the fence and into the war. She said, go ahead and start listening. I'll bill you later. The way love in isolation is self-love. A stone in each hand is not the same as a bird in flight. Why do we insist on killing birds in every idiom? We cooked up the taste of campfire and cockroach. You are the riot under the flood, crashing through my dreams like a tidal wave, pool blue and permanent, our own private ending. In my dream, the bird escapes the cage, too late. Only the spider survives, its pale heart beating like the memory of wings. A child is born into smoke and aftermath. We reimagined, but politics still won the war against the earth. And we all lost, and we all lost. And we are all the child, and we are all the children killing birds. Thank you.
Great work, Holly. Thank you so much. Just continually getting stronger and stronger. And I love listening to you every time. Thank you. That's why that's why she's the director of poetry here at the Institute, folks. And for good reason. All right. Coming up next, we have I'll say up to bat now. I'll do the baseball metaphor. Up to bat now, we have Keith Gabry, meaning on deck would be Norm Maddox, but I don't see Norm in the room. And so if Norm doesn't join us while Keith is reading, that means Rebecca Lee, be prepared. You might be the actual on deck person who's going to be going next. But in the meantime, please welcome a man who's got his own chapbook out there, Oakland, I'm Not Dead, Mr. Keith Gabry. Keith, what have you got for us tonight?
Thanks, Paul. I have a poem I wrote in your workshop last weekend. So it's called Migratory Morning. I awoke with fog in my brain, eyelids flapped open like an unsure bird. On my pillowcase, black spilled across cotton encasement. When my torso creaked vertical, I flung my nightmare through open glass into a nightingale's nocturnal nest, asleep in their own migratory cells. And I have one more. When a polluted rainbow skinned his violet knee on park asphalt, I sprinted towards smoke-inhaled colors, bleeding into my cupped hands, past verdant trees stuffed with squawking on diseased branches. My hands carried his polluted body to your paternal grip. There, under our kitchen bulb, you cradled Roar G. Biv until he cried out the industrial smoke, infecting his refracted and reflected self. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Keith. Your amazing wordplay keeps us guessing and kind of off balance, and I always love that about your work. Thank you for sharing new stuff with us tonight as well. So I'm casting about the room, and I am not seeing Mr. Norm Maddox. I know, to my great disappointment, because Norm is such a lovely, amazing, powerful, inspiring writer. Perhaps he'll join us later and we'll do that. So that means now coming up to bat is Rebecca Lee. And then after Rebecca's done, we're going to hand the baton back to Hollie Hardy as our co-host for the night. And Rebecca, welcome this evening. What have you got for us tonight?
Thanks so much. So I was going to read, sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. One second. So I was going to read a cento that I also just found out is going to be in Colossus also. So it is cento for Roe versus Wade. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Choices concerning contraception, family relationships, procreation, and child rearing. Every single one of these laws is called into question. My responsibility is to tell you the truth. They used to say the right to personal choice is implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, fundamental to our very existence and survival. I was nearly naked, aware of myself as a separate self, distinct from dirt and bone. They used to say our whole constitutional heritage rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control men's minds, women's bodies. Anything may happen when womanhood has ceased to be a protected occupation. They used to say that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Most of the time, my mind gnaws on such ridiculous fictions. We are born with dreams in our hearts. So free we seem, so fettered fast we are. When we learned how to behave in America, they put me in the closet because they liked me still. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Each month it got a little less civil, terrible weights of stone, relentless. Darkly I gaze into the days ahead. I imagine the body giving itself up for another system. What will they say? That the paramount destiny and mission of woman are to fulfill the noble and benign offices of wife and mother, that life in a box is better than no life at all, barely daring to breathe or chew. Will you speak before I'm gone? Will you prove already too late? You're wasting time and we have so little. Who can open the door who does not reach for the latch? When it's over, I don't want to wonder, how will we survive? You foolish men, don't you know? For the eyeing of my scars, there is a charge. You may write me down in history, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. I am treacherous with old magic. A woman like that is not ashamed to die, and it will never end until it all ends. Open this when you need me most. When I rise up above the earth, beyond this passage of the gate of death, I'm going to go out like a fucking meteor, bright as the blood red edge of the moon. When it's over, I want to say, oh, my enemy, this is a torch song. Touch me and you'll burn. Thank you.
Yay, I'm so glad you made it. And congrats on your getting published in Colossus. We get to be together in there. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. Thank you.
Hooray. I just couldn't be prouder of all of you guys. Just dedicating so much to your own work. It's hard to claim being a poet, and yet you guys do. So, and now the one and only Paul Corman Roberts, Bay Area king, and he and I have partnered on so many things over the years, from Beast Crawl to working together at the SF Creative Writing Institute to hosting I don't know how many readings together. But I'm excited to hear your new work, and I'm super excited about your new book, Bone Moon Palace, which has come out fairly recently on Nomadic Press, and I'm putting a link in the chat for y'all now. And he will be teaching some more classes this summer. He's on a little sabbatical right now, and then you guys can check out classes with him coming up this summer. So, Paul, what you got for us?
Thank you so much, Holly. Just a couple of newer poems. You know, that's that saying, when you write a book, make sure that you write a book that you really enjoy, because you're going to get sick of reading it if it gets published. I am sick of reading my book, so I've been doing it for a minute. I'm going to read some new poems tonight, just because the poems I'm always in love with are the poems I've just written. So this first one is called, so just two tonight. This is called The Last Rock Star in Los Angeles. It's harder to burn out when you won't fade away. Who's to be blamed? Fa la da dee, the poet's life's for me. It never happens the way you think it will, lounging in bed on the threshold, an easy laugh between cocktails, the 6th or 7th viewing of the Lightning Hopkins documentary. The rainbow is there, but not there. The regular stool is there, but not there. We never see larger than life anymore. The old joints now off the archetypal radar, faint dust outlines of the dead float along the rail. Scantily clad, scandalously young wife, 40 years his junior, and she's 62, sleeping next to his fabled body as he bridged in his sleep. To say he was bedridden never was truer on every level, like Grandpa in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, his vehicle seeking any and all comfort in the storms in all of the ports of California. And then another new poem that I got, stuff I haven't shared with anybody here in the room. I thank you so much. This is called Iasmos Through Ether. Since I was reading comic books, my dog, a strange place to come from in one's consciousness. The suggestive mind as a power relationship. I don't live so much the concept of an altered state on my ass, on my feet, or even eyes wide, to a formulaic storyline. What am I open to? What do I open for? I find it easier and easier to fall in love with images on a computer screen. Should I be surprised Meta tries to sell me intimate AI partners now? We spend so much time complaining about what hard work dating is. Why not try to find love in a complex piece of code instead? I recall the story of a woman who meets their most desired personal intimacy demographic, not through an online dating service, but in public, at a political meeting or hipster laundromat of some kind, and they have an enjoyable coffee, which leads to further dates and eventually intimacy. And throughout the whole process, the woman cannot stop wondering if her partner is a human or a three-dimensional bot with sophisticated AI. In the end, they break up, and it is difficult to remove this partner from her life because they keep bringing up reasons that she might be unsure of their relationship status, even though the provisionally ex-partner doesn't seem anxious to spend any real time with her until she undertakes the reprogramming of all her social media profiles, whereupon she never hears from the other person again. And it is at that point she realizes she no longer has the use for any pretense of humanity. And this is not a new story. Blade Runner, Metropolis, and yes, the modern Prometheus. What makes the Homo sapien heart stray outside not just itself, but its own species, in search of species that mirror, go beyond what we believe any others can mirror. And yes, I find this odd and lacking, but that may be another story, my dog, Iasmos Through the Ether. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Good to hear you again. Yay for writing new shit. That's the real lesson. When you publish a book, make sure you write a lot of new shit so that you aren't forced to keep reading the book over and over again. But if you haven't read the book, get the book, y'all. Get the book. Up next, we have Melissa Anderson. Ryan on deck.
Ars Poetica number 32, because Ars Poetica number 28 was the conversation from last week, and Ars Poetica number 39, the dream held in abeyance, insisting somehow, meandering in and out of synapse and sinew, and Ars Poetica number 17 showed up in the fever pitch of distorted memory, sunrise melting, not in today, but the illegitimate illiteracy of assonance, the starry night, abstract and simultaneously photographic, in its almost realism, veering off with impressionistic notes. The art of poetry is motion slowed, reflected back through mirrored ponds. Water lilies, awakening at the top of a stair with one ear cupped, the other severed, on the single cot-sized bed, waiting, longing to hear the poetry of somnambulance, the lilting, lulling hollow of dreams, Sarajevo calling, Dubrovnik's unnatural light in fauvist colors, too bright, too loud, too enticing to look away, domes and porticos, the Ars Poetica of arches and through petroglyphs depicted thousands of words ago, symbolic prelinguistic affect that definitely resonates, bouncing off the delicate crystalline structure of ossicles, degenerating into nearly indecipherable monologues and diatribes, lapping in sync the water in your head, my ears, the cranial ocean we carry around, not so far from the sea. Much more recent our migration than rigid solid facts of the us, as if we were always pretends, privileging mind over matter and certain thank you very much stated in staccato, the meaning between lines highlighted. Fuck you very much, Renee Descartes, for separating something that is neither rigid nor solid. Perhaps you only meant that we keep head and heart apart for mere moments, not build an entire empire upon that premise. Thank you.
No problem. Ryan Snellman is up next. Yeah, Ryan.
Since I can't wander too far from coffee, I'll read one of the coffee poems. Quad tall latte. Sirens scream, floods terror, unfocused task, tinkered, toiled, time sleeping with anxiety. Quad tall latte, pumpkin scone. Don't worry, it's seasonal. It'll run away before you tire of its sweet coyness. Yes, I'm fine. I'll get you that report tomorrow. Sure. See you at the game. Sheets soaked, terror floating through the night on a coyote's howl. Quad tall latte. Peach cream cheese scone. You'll do just fine once the rain settles in. Did you see that catch? No? Well, there was always next year, next year, next year. I can't see in a world with no sharp edges. Blurred hands fumble, tinkering with an already completed task. Shrieking siren scream, let me go. Quad tall latte, straight jacket scone, postal impulses. Siren scream, take me home. Your curse shatters the beauty with a 9-volt battery on the tongue of this existence.
Thanks, Ryan. I like the new ending. You have lots more imagery in there. It just keeps building. Nice work. Up next is Lucy Hilmer, and then I'm going to pass it back to Paul.
Okay, great. This was the assignment for this week. Thank you, Matthew Zapruder. So it's long and tall, like everything in your latest book, which is new for me. Under siege, here on a Zafu in San Francisco, 2 flights up, I sit with thoughts conscripted to cross borders into my own brain that breathes itself still in the wall-to-wall country of myself, my buttocks sinking on a raft of refuge, going nowhere on this sea of olive green carpet where I sit cornered. I am but sad northwest by windowed light, cross-legged, upright, armed with an arsenal of time, a 20-minute watch over my body, mind breathing itself beyond rockets launched from Putin's white tabled mind, beyond bulletins streaming in from subway encampments in wintered down Kiev, where women sit breathing underground on cement by bundled children, while others cluster in a sisterhood of doorways, exhaling cold clouds of fear, their borrowed rifles cocked, and my own daughter seeking home on the beach. No, not the Australian beach of that apocalyptic movie, but close by in New Zealand, she, a refugee from her own country, gone mad.
Very fine and chilling poem for us, Lucy. Thank you so much for sharing that with the room tonight. We plow on through the open mic list, and there aren't a ton names left, but I'm looking forward to each and every one of these folks. Up next, we have coming up to bat is Ethan Stanton, and on deck is the socially distanced Jack Varnell. So please welcome Ethan Stanton to Right from the Gut. Ethan, what have you got for us tonight?
Thank you. So this is a poem also from the last assignment that Hollie gave us, which was modeled on Matthew Zapruder's poem, so The Long and Skinny. Thinking about one of the assignments she gave us was to write a poem responding to politics. So that this is that. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit method acting. So take it that way. So here we go. Colobopsis explodens. 9:35 a.m. English 1, squeaking black markers call my students' attention to today's enjoyable exercise, a debate. Would you kill a man like the novel Hero? What is a hero? Define self-defense. My biology article on Colobopsis explodens, the exploding ant, says, previously nicknamed yellow goo, because that is what it turns into when it blows itself up, defending the hive. To write a poem early this morning, I awoke on my screen's frame in Ukraine, a man in glasses 10 years my elder, in a dark blue jacket, slouched in dogged acceptance on an old spinny chair under fake wood paneling, holding a new gun in both hands. In class, we continue reading. The author writes, bloody teeth of the puma. The horseman with the rifle is coming for the hero. Lifting heads off desks, all eyes are focused. I ask for a prediction after 50 pages of coiled spring suspense, a collective shiver of pleasure. Someone, my student says, has to die. Today in Ukraine, they decorated a man who volunteered to liquefy himself on a bridge. They were filling the wine bottles with gasoline and stuffing rags in. The girl's tiny legs lie like sticks on the metal table. She was 6. Blood-covered unicorn pajamas. A bitter smoke fills my brain. From birth, the exploding ant's entire abdomen is filled with toxins like lugging intestines packed with 50 pounds of C4, genes screaming, you were born to die, you were born to die, you were born, you boiling acid geyser, do your fucking job. In the dream of the subway station, the joyful gun barrel burns my cheek like a branding iron. I hold it to my lips like a wine bottle. I kiss it like a lover. Time is frozen. The floor is red and sticky. The enemy ant is jabbering and flailing. My front legs still pin him down. As the poison spills out, I hear only my breath pounding the walls of the universe. For the first time, I am alive. I am alive. I finished that motherfucker. I am the destroyer. I am the destroyer. The ant is scrabbling on the plastic. The researcher adjusts the lighting for a better view in the novel in my class. The hero's machete splits the rifleman's skull like a melon. The students flash gleeful smiles. I know I should recoil in horror. This morning, I remember my daughter was wearing unicorn pajamas.
Wonderful, Ethan. Thank you so much. That was really great. That was good. You had us all. You had us all from beginning to end on that. Thank you so much. All right. Now coming up to bat is Jack Varnell. Meaning on deck is Sarah Beal. Jack Varnell hosts the Social Yet Distance podcast, and he is otherwise sometimes known as by his alter ego, the Emotional Orphan. But here is a link to the Social Yet Distance podcast, and I always love hearing this stuff. So Jack, what do you got tonight?
Hi guys, thanks for the space, and I will go ahead and cop to the fact that I'm extremely disorganized in the middle of a move. So bear with me. I spun the old semi-regular folder to see what came out, and this is what we got. This one is called Heaven as Oz. You've heard the story before. It's about heaven. You know, the one-man show that's run with rigid authority. The one where no one really needed saving. They didn't even need a choice. But then that girl got hungry and no longer did they hear the voice. There was a son that was given to the earth, and there was a ghost given to share the task. And upon closer inspection, the needles of reality came to poke out the questioning eyes through the wrong end of a science lab microscope. But don't be worried or alarmed, because there's no religion in the schools. The angels were lost, and then a crown that got vanished in a holy crusade. So play that sax bird-like, Gabriel, because what was lost has just been found. Get the scrolls over to King James. Gutenberg will print them out in about 500 years. We'll put them in the hands of the people who will tell the stories again and again, however they prefer to tell them. And the typos will be seen in their living, making sure that charity is left out of the picture. No meek will inherit shit. Forgiveness or repentance will not be a requirement because nobody knows the truth anyway. So now the rain is falling and truth is changing based on the interpretation and free will. The sky is falling, it's raining down, and there are no shipbuilders. First raindrops followed by fire, but neither they nor the greed can be extinguished. Thanks, guys.
Beautifully done, sir. Beautifully done. Thank you. Getting some love in the chat screen there too, Jack. So definitely check that out.
Yes.
All right. Now coming up to bat is Sarah Beal, and that means on deck we have Elisa Salison. Sarah, who's done so many of the workshops here with San Francisco Creative Writing, is the publisher and co-founder of Colossus Press, and there is a link to Colossus Press. You can check out the very wonderful press that she runs at that link in the chat screen. So great to have you here tonight, Sarah. What you got for us?
Thank you. I have a really new piece. It's called The Watch. And yeah, this is something I just wrote in the last week or so. The Watch. This uncivil twilight unwinds at its center. Nerves dangle, signal fires, their embers just shy of stars. The edges of the sky pull themselves tight, toss unhinged stillness into the air. My mind flies, a plastic bag, wrestling the gusts, riding the winds as they snarl through the canyons. I feel it press, feel it tighten, but stand at the curb, shuffling feet, not knowing where to rest my gaze. The moon, whose smile hints at teeth, closes her eyes, lets the misplaced wind run over her face like a train. Tonight's horizon's soft smog is torn away, The distant city sparkles, exposed in this fricative howl of Friday night. Beside me, oak and cedar stretch, arthritic in ocean air. Invisible tide fills and drains, rushes chamber to chamber, unsettles dry leaves. There's nothing soothing at the bare end of January. I know it and wait like a naughty child for the inevitable slap. A peculiar violence rolls like an old vein under the skin, like these craggy hills under the convective wind. It clears the night to stable fractures. Dusty-eyed, I hold my breath and watch for fires. Thanks.
Absolutely gorgeous, Sarah. Thank you so much. All righty. That means we have coming up now is Lisa Salison, who has got a book coming out. Really, I can't wait for it to come out, and is so looking forward to that. And I just know she's got something good for us tonight. Elisa, what did you want to share with us tonight?
Thank you, Paul. So I've had a week and did not think that I would get a new poem written for tonight, but I did. I wrote this morning, so just keep that in mind. It's called David Cassidy. Friday night, ending my darkest of March weeks, I sit with Jill. Two middle-aged women stretched on a sofa, debating carry-out dinner. Will it be Asian or Mexican or pizza? And Jill mentions David Cassidy. Remember him? I pull a screen from my pocket because whatever happened to David Cassidy? David Cassidy, my Partridge Family latchkeyed companion through years of suburban Maryland. After school pubescence, I'd scoot my chair up too close to the black and white TV in the corner of the kitchen. I think I love you, so what am I so afraid of? In between spoonfuls of chunky Jif peanut butter straight from the jar. So what am I so afraid of? David Cassidy sang, just for me. The screen in my pocket tells me David Cassidy is now dead. Liver failure. After too many DUIs, it tells me David Cassidy's last words. So what am I so afraid of? So what am I so afraid of were not David Cassidy's last words. Instead, as reported by his daughter, who I now know has become a scream queen horror movie star, because I've spent the last hour clicking and scrolling through David Cassidy's life, in between bites of congealed pad thai, straight from the flimsy white box. I now know David Cassidy's last words. So much wasted time. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Wow, that was really good. You guys are so hot tonight. Thank you for bringing such good work to Write from the Gut this evening. Elisa was the last. Well, we had one more name on the list, Christopher Moore, but I don't see Christopher in the room, unfortunately. So I would have loved to have heard Christopher and Norm and so many other folks that signed up but didn't make it tonight. But before I hand it back to Holly to introduce our guest poet, Mr. Matthew Zapruder, who we're so very, very pleased to have here this evening, I did want to make an announcement quick that the San Francisco Creative Writing Institute would very much like for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And here is a link to it. We currently have 24 people signed up. Our goal is to get to 50 tonight. So there is the link to Creative Writing Institute's YouTube channel. You just have to click on that, hit subscribe, and you're going to have access to a lot of great content and a lot of great readings from a lot of great writers. You will not be sorry. And thank you so much for doing that. And without further ado, I am going to turn the hot mic over again to the one, the only Hollie Hardy.
Thanks, Paul. All right. So I think that this reading will be on the YouTube if we're all okay with it. So you can share it with your friends that didn't come tonight. And are you guys ready for Matthew Zapruder? Yes. Matthew has read for me a handful of times over the years, and all of them have been special. He read at Flight of Poets, he read at my first book release, and I think at Saturday Night Special. And so I'm super excited to have him reading here tonight after my students carefully studied his newest book, Father's Day, and then we talked about it deeply and at length, and then they had 3 different options of poems to try to write based on his work. And so I'm going to read a bio for him, and then we're going to have him come up and then ask some questions of him at the end. Matthew Zapruder is the author of 5 collections of poetry, including Come On All You Ghosts, which won multiple awards and was named a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, and most recently Father's Day from Copper Canyon Press 2019, as well as Why Poetry, a book of prose, which is also highly recommended. He's received a Guggenheim Fellowship, a William Carlos Williams Award, a Sarton Award from the Academy of American Poets and American Arts and Sciences, and a Lannan Foundation Residency Fellowship in Marfa, Texas. In 2000, he co-founded Verse Press and is now editor-at-large at Wave Books, where he edits contemporary poetry, prose, and translations. In 2016-17, he held the annually rotating position of editor of the New York Times Magazine poetry column. He lives in the Bay Area, where he's an associate professor at St. Mary's College of California, and you can find out about him at MatthewZapruder.com. Matthew, welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hollie. It's great to see you. Big fan of Hollie's. And it was really great to hear everyone read. It was so cool. I didn't know what to expect, and the poems were terrific, and felt slightly embarrassed when they were based on my poems, but just self-conscious. But great poems, and really just such a strong reading, and I just enjoyed it. I guess I don't feel like I get to just sit and listen that often right now in my life, so it was nice. So thank you for that. And yeah, Hollie asked if I would come and read, so I'm glad to do it, and I'm really honored that you all had spent time with my most recent book. And yeah, I think I'll just read some poems from that, and then I'm happy to answer questions. The first poem I'm going to read, I never really know how to introduce this poem, because the title of it contains such a charged word. The poem is called The Privilege of Poetry, and it's that word, is privilege is such a complicated, important concept to consider. But I guess I was thinking when I wrote it about how we really are privileged to be poets and to write poetry and to be together in poetry, and that there's a kind of there's a sort of positive way, I guess, to think about that too, and that because it's a privilege that anybody can share writing, anybody who has language at least. And I think about that a lot today, I guess, because in the midst of all this horror that's going on in the Ukraine, people are still there, they're still writing, they're still sharing their work, they're still preserving their culture, and that is they're still taking care of like the little flame of that privilege to be imagining and imaginative even in the worst circumstances. So yeah, so here's The Privilege of Poetry. Over someone's shoulder I read, we should listen to everything, but the more I listen, the more my fingers are lonely in the abandoned house where the absence of music is a kind of music, as the theorist whose name I forgot wrote. And when I read it, it was so wrong. I gasped, like all my thoughts had been sucked out into the ocean to crash back in onto my head. where the shadow of a wasp keeps arriving. If only I were truly willing to have a little evil poured in my ear, says the politician inside me, who will never win. I'm almost too busy to vote. It's just me on those days. I'm trying to hear the dark light of a terrarium when it longs to be a park, buried underneath pre-human snow, so I can tell you, which is the privilege of poetry. I think the end of that poem gets, I was like, I just figured I'd just keep going until I essentially more or less like lost track of what I was talking about. And I was operating purely on instinct. So when I read it now, I think it feels right, but I cannot paraphrase it. So I think that's maybe makes it the best ending in the whole book. So the next poem I'm going to read is one I wrote at the end of, I think it was 2018, sort of in the middle of the worst, sort of the, not the worst, but kind of like the deep into the Trump administration, and particularly in the middle of the crisis of kids on the border being put in camps, and us, sort of watching this or knowing this was happening. And I was thinking a lot about that as a father, and as just a citizen and feeling unsure. And I remember there was a press conference right at the end of the year, and someone, it wasn't Trump, but it was one of his evil, shades, was standing in the rain underneath an umbrella, and they said something like, well, we only 2 of the kids died, so we feel like we did a pretty good job. So, obviously that was like unspeakable, right? So anyway, this is a poem that kind of came out of that. It's called Our Custody. This year was serious in a dumb way, and hilarious, like a grave cut into a smile. Dreams constantly died without names. We listened to the earth say nothing and knew everything. The earth a grave we throw words into. Seeds in a dark Arctic closet wait for the new garden tended by machines. One whose name will become dust said in the shadow under an umbrella, in our custody, only 2 died, so it was a good year. What can we say? They were children and will always be. This poem, long before the coronavirus pandemic, I was very puzzled by this use of the term viral to describe, what would happen with a poem as if it were like a positive thing. It always struck me as weird because a virus, in my experience, especially again as a parent, is always a chilling thing to experience. A virus, when your kid gets a virus, it immediately ruins everything. So anyway, I was always like, why is viral, going viral? Anyway, so I was thinking about what it would feel like if you wrote a poem and it went viral, which I'm in no danger of, so I was free to imagine it. And so anyway, I just wrote it from the point of view of a poor soul whose poem goes viral. It's called The Blackbird. The Blackbird. I wrote a poem once. I thought it was, to be honest, just okay. Then it went viral. Everyone loved it, and soon enough, I almost did too. Though I also knew something nameless, I pushed down ever deeper. I wrote more, a whole book named after the viral poem. It won all the awards. People even really named a whole conference after it and wept when they even thought about it. It was far too much, so extreme it had to be real, what I had done. Now, whenever I try to write, I feel so afraid of feeling nothing. So I just write house and war and dapple. Everyone smiles and says yes. But really, I just want to get high and sit on the porch of my heart Yes, of my heart. That's what I said. Where I can watch the city go by and imagine buildings have feelings. But whenever I close my eyes and try to go there, I only see a black bird with a yellow beak staring at me. I keep waiting, but it just stares back at me and does not speak even one word from the other world. I'll read one more just in I wasn't gonna read any new work, but I was so moved and inspired by the quality of your work and the courage you show and, bring it forward. And so I will share a poem from a book I'm sort of, I don't know if I'm working on it. I'm just writing poems, but it's not in a book that I published yet. So I don't know really what to say about this, except sometimes a word just pops into my head and then I feel like, oh, maybe I'll try to write something. And I had, for some reason, this memory of my father, this story about my father winning his first case in Peoria. He was a lawyer. I have no idea whether that's true or I don't know anything about it. So anyway, so I just remembered Peoria. I was like, and so I thought, oh, I should write a poem called Peoria and see what happens. So this is that poem. And I am thinking about my dad, and I cannot vouch for any of the facts of this entire poem. So don't, let's not put this, let's not cite this poem. But anyway, thank you again for listening. And after this, I'll be happy to answer some questions. So this is Peoria. I don't know when that name entered my ear. I remember hearing that was where my father won his first case. He must have stayed a while, maybe in the Mark Twain Hotel. He could not have been far from young Richard Pryor. Maybe the famous brown bison watched him from a field, or a commemorative mug with facts about megafauna and the quaternary extinction event on the other side. There's still a few in the zoo, their shaggy mountainous shoulders permanently hunched in preemptive defeat. Years of constant travel. Whenever he returned from whatever city, he would bring a snow globe back for her. You could turn or shake it and see white flakes far too slowly descend through some eternally clear liquid onto appropriate plastic landmarks. Among them, people stilled in the act of moving agree life is elsewhere and the past always misremembered, so they shall stay forever here and be loved. Oh, happy shadows of the ordinary. A collection of plastic half eggs translucently covering various mid-sized cities cherished on a mantle grew. I don't remember seeing Peoria. Maybe that was before the first time he had almost not remembered, and with guilty gratitude stuck the far too expensive trinket in the pocket of his overcoat, running to the plane, soon to be filled with that once ubiquitous smoke. It flew through years of undefeated night toward our capital. I had not yet been born. Here, I've been slowly learning to speak to these nameless purple flowers in their language, in which Peoria means mountainside hidden in productive shade between orchard and dream. It's where they grow. I see the planets glowing on a wall above my own son's bed. The past is always misremembered. Hold it to your ear. It has the sweet hum of the superstore buried inside an apple. You can almost hear it say, "Be glad your father never told you elsewhere. That's where life is." Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing your work with me. And yeah, so I'm happy to further confuse the situation.
Matthew, that was so wonderful. I love that you read a new piece for us that is not yet in the world, and it had so many wonderful lines. Also, save the chat so that once we get off of here, you can go back and look at all the nice things that people said to you when you're not trying to read. I love that way of of listening to readings. Since we can't clap for each other, it's so nice to give feedback by putting favorite lines in the chat, and people have been doing that all night. So feel free to take that with you. Before I open it up to students who are all dying to ask you, they've been instructed to think of smart things to ask you. I want you to, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the form that you used in Father's Day. It's such a particular form with those of you who aren't familiar, it's this long, skinny poems that are all enjammed and like one long sentence with no punctuation and no capitalization that just sort of runs together. What was the intention behind that form? And is that a form that you use in your other books generally, or is it something that you just chose for Father's Day? And how did you come to that form?
Yeah, thanks, Holly, for the question. And I agree, by the way, about the chat. I think it's also an accessibility benefit to accessibility. And I'm, as a teacher, I would like to be able to somehow translate that into my in-person classes. But anyway, that's a different matter. Yeah, I think it's funny. The past couple of books I've written a lot of poems in that sort of like shorter line, sometimes with no punctuation, sometimes with some punctuation like commas, or occasionally even with standard punctuation. And it's funny, it's clearly like, it clearly stands out for people because there are definitely plenty of poems in this book that aren't in that form. And so, but it's clearly like a form that strikes people for some, it's like, I think sometimes negatively, actually. I think some people are bothered by it. I can't say, I think form for me comes from, it's very somatic. Like when I'm writing, I have to find the right form for the poem that somehow corresponds with like the way my mind is encountering the language. And so the speed of things, like how fast or slow they go and how it's all done, I have to like sort of grope towards it almost, and like I have to find it. And like and I can't really finish a poem until it's in the right form. And I can't really change the form of a poem, so at least not significantly. I mean, I can edit it and change line breaks a lot, which I do, often editing for clarity kind of like towards the end. And I know that, with poems that are like that, sometimes things can get a little blurry. And, it's not necessarily my favorite thing about that form, but it's, but I don't, on the other hand, I mean, like sort of barging in with a lot of like organizing stuff wouldn't be so great either. So I got to kind of try to make it so, I mean, honestly, like any one of those poems, like grammatically, they work. You could diagram any of the sentences. And if you actually, piece them together, that's like this kind of like unspoken pact I have with the reader, that I wouldn't abandon them by putting them in that situation and then not following through with something that actually would make sense if you slow down and read it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's really an answer, but I just, it's something that I feel like I have to do in certain poems, but like I said, I mean, there's other poems that aren't like that. So, and I have found that the commas, I've gradually been able to reintroduce the comma at least into those poems and not feel like I'm wrecking them, but yeah.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about your process of how you arrive at ideas and how you get from idea to your finished poem?
Yeah, I can try. I'm actually writing a book about this. I have another book of prose that's coming out in fall 2023, which is in which the poem I wrote, Our Custody. The book is called The Story of a Poem, and it's basically I start with the beginning drafts of that poem, and then I write through the poem, and then I write about what's going on in my life and what's happening. And so it's a whole book length, like kind of tracing of the evolution of that poem. But really, I mean, mostly the way I start, I'm sure this must be familiar to you, Holly, and I'm sure, to you, Paul, and to everyone in this room on some levels, that, I start almost with basically with nothing. I mean, I start with maybe like a little glimmer of a feeling that maybe a word is interesting or an idea or some kind of image, or maybe like I have a little idea like that I said about that Peoria poem. I was like, oh yeah, that word and then that place and my dad. And I was like, okay, let's just go jump into it, you know. But I have not found that. I found some that the firmer the idea is at the beginning, sometimes it can be kind of hard to move around in it. So, you know, not that that never works, but usually it's more like I mean, I wrote something yesterday actually, and I just felt so shitty the whole day. And I just was like, I need to try to write something. It's the only thing I can think of to make myself, and I had absolutely no idea. So I just wanted to make something. So sometimes I just start like that and I just throw something on the page or on the screen and I just start trying to mess with it. And then I wait until I feel a spark, and then I follow that, and I try not to get too attached, you know, because I'm just trying to make something that is worth somebody reading it, I guess, and is real. You know, I hate writing stuff that's bullshit, and like, you know, I can't stand it. So you know, so I just like can't tolerate that. So my process, I think, is to stay away from the intolerable feeling that I'm bullshitting myself, I guess. that might be my process. So, you know, it's like hiking on like a mountain pass with like very dangerous you know, cliffs on either side or something. And so I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that's but you know, and I have lots of tricks that I've developed, as I'm sure everybody does in this room, you know, lots of like writing exercises or things. And I guess the thing I usually tell my students is like, it's not that my imagination is any better than yours, of course. It's not that my poems, it's that I've made so many mistakes that I can see them coming, and I cannot waste maybe like 2 weeks on something, because I'm like, oh yeah, I already did that 3 times. So I know that if I do that, that's going to fuck everything up. So I'm going to go this other way. And so that's the thing I can teach, is like what to look out for, I guess, and how to go in more interesting directions. But yeah, but you know, I got to still make my mistakes like everybody does. So, you know.
All right, last one for me, and then I'm going to open up the floor for
Sure.
everyone else. What advice do you have for my emerging, well, for all of the emerging poets in the room? What are some of a piece of advice or two that you would have for these guys?
99.62% of what people say on social media about writing is totally wrong. And that goes for publishing also. Most of what people say is incorrect.
Can you give some examples of incorrect things?
Yeah, I mean, people say things like, you know, oh, nobody reads this kind of poem anymore, or you have to do this if you want that to happen, or you know, like, you know, I can't stand X kind of thing, and blah blah blah, or I'm an editor, you know, like, and that kind of stuff. And then everybody gets all worked up, and there's a big argument over, and it's like, it's just not, the first thing wasn't true, and then like it's not worth. So, and I feel like sometimes emerging writers can feel like maybe there is some reality out there that they don't know yet, and it's just it can feel crummy to people, I think. And so I just hate to see, you know, but you're probably all too wise for that anyway. But you know, I wouldn't, but that's not even good advice. I don't know, who cares about that social media, but I don't know. The thing that was the biggest thing for me was like just reading other people's poems, like my sharing, and the people I met when I was in graduate school and along the way, and sort of trading poems with them and hearing what they were reading. And I just tried to soak everything up. And like, for me being in workshop, I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, I remember more other people's poems than I do mine, because I think I was learning a lot from watching what they were doing. And I think I might have I think I would have learned more never bringing in one of my poems than I would have always bringing in my poems. I'm sure of that, because like, and just, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's the same advice anybody gives, you know, read a lot, keep an open mind, and try a bunch of different things. And one thing I will just, only other thing is try to get a writing partner who you can be accountable to. I've done lots of accountability things with people where it's like, oh, for a month, we're going to write a poem a day, and just sheer guilt and shame will just get you a long way, you know, like in terms of your like output. So if you, especially if you're a person who has trouble sitting down, or you have a busy life or something, you know, like kids or big busy job or something, and like both, whatever. Like it's nice to just have a partner who you're like, we're gonna write 10 lines a day, every single day for a month, and we're gonna email back and forth without any like no workshopping. Like just like all we're allowed to say to each other is thank you for sending this, you know. And I think that's good, because then you because especially in our hectic lives, you know, it's, you know, you it's good to just be accountable, I guess. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I found it helpful.
I think it's helpful. I think that's a great, I mean, that's such an easy piece of advice. And I think it's, and my class, Ethan's like, Hollie's class is great for that. That is, I mean, a lot of people that come to my class, they're coming because they need a deadline, because they want someone to make them write, because of accountability, because they want to read each other's work.
Well, the thing they get from your class too, though, is community, which you don't get from that. But I'm saying, like, in addition to that, and it's really important not to have it be a workshopping thing, or not to have it be critique, especially if you're generating a lot of work. It's like, I have a rule. I did this with Ada Limon, like, you know, we're just like, we're not allowed to say anything except thank you for sending this. That's it. Because like, you don't want the pressure. You don't want to be like, oh my God, that was awesome. The next day, if somebody says that was good, you're like, wait, but yesterday you said that was awesome. But it's, you know, like, you know, you don't want to get distracted. You're just making stuff. And it's really productive, you know? And so, and it's feels good to be in the rhythm, you know? So I would recommend everybody do that.
I love that you write with Ada. Ada and Natalie, I know Natalie Diaz did a letter writing project together, and I taught both of them in the class with you. So the connection between the three of you and the work from this particular workshop, I love that you guys were all kind of communicating. And I think that really shows like having a community of writers that you cultivate and that sort of support each other. And even if it's something as simple as just send me work. I think that's great.
No, I mean, I find, you know, Ada and other folks that I mean, it's life sustaining. I mean, just like having a new poem from her is like, it's just awesome. I mean, it's like, it's really, sometimes it's the only unadulteratedly good thing that happens to me in a single day, you know. It's like I just get, you know, I mean, not that I don't mean everything's bad, but it's just there's something, it's just like purely good. And you're just like, oh, that's amazing. I didn't, okay.
Well, Ada's such a unicorn.
Yeah, she's great.
She's magical. Awesome. All right, well, I've been hogging all of this, so I'm going to open the view up and let y'all jump in or raise your hand and I'll call on you. Either way is fine. Ask your smart questions.
I don't have to be smart.
Ask your dumb questions. Ask questions of our guest.
I have a question. So thank you so much for being here. It's really wonderful. One of the things in your book that resonated for me and inspired my poem was the trope of names or nameless, or naming things. And I noticed in the poem you just read, the new one, you also had that reference. And I'm wondering, when that happens, do you just let yourself go with that and let it show up in as many poems as it shows up in, or was there more of a conscious effort to include it at times?
It's not conscious. Like it wasn't something I did on purpose, but I know what you mean. It does. And I mean, there's an essay by Emerson called The Poet, where he talks about how the poets made all the names, he says, and poets were the first people to name things. And Rilke has that famous remark from his first letter to young poets, where he says, you know, in order to write poems, you have to pretend you're the first person on earth. Like nobody's ever seen anything, nobody's ever described anything, and you're describing it as if it's the first time it's ever been seen. So, you know, so I think that space, I find those, like, you know, that kind of mentality to be helpful for me in making poems. So I think sometimes I say it in the poem that I'm doing that, I guess, but I'm probably always doing, I could probably say it all the time in all the poems, you know, but that would be super irritating. So, but yeah, no, you're right. I do that. That is central to what I think we're doing here. Answer your question, sort of.
More questions from my smart students?
Well, that's a lot of pressure. I guess I had a few written down, but the first was just in your poem 3:14 p.m. You wrote about Nazim Hikmet. I mean, you mentioned his name, and I was just wondering, you know, if you're able to go back and kind of recapture what the associative link was to him from the subject that you were writing about, which I took as kind of climate crisis, climate change.
Well, I have to look at the poem again. I mean, I love Hikmet. So I mean, that's maybe not really an answer, but and I think, you know, sometimes when I'm going on something, I just try to let in my perceptions as they come. And so it's not, and then I have to go back, you know, and because sometimes those perceptions are boring. But I mean, the you know, Charles Olson's essay, Projective Verse, you know, he talks about how, you know, a poem, it should be one perception following on the other. And that kind of seems sort of obvious to us now, but it's actually not how poetry was written for a long time. Or sometimes it was how it was written. I think Keats writes like that, actually. But like, but I mean, but like, you know, so I think I looked over at my shelf and I saw Nazim Hikmet's book, and his face is on it, and I thought he was looking down on me. And then I thought about that line, "Live like a squirrel," which I think is so funny and awesome from one of his poems. You know, I just thought I love that line. And so it just those were the order of my perceptions. Now, like, you know, that's, like I said before, I mean, I do that a lot, and like 90% of that stuff goes because the perception isn't interesting, or it doesn't feel generative or whatever. But that's sort of how I'm writing, is just like tracking my thoughts in a way and not trying to control them too much. So I believe that's what happened in that moment. Yeah. So, you know, and you just have to, when you're doing that, I mean, you have to be like, well, does that feel too like unrelated, like totally unrelated? Like there's, you know, there's like a line between something being surprising and it being totally unrelated, right? There's like a space there, I guess. And so everybody has to find their own like feeling about where that is for them. And I guess you could kind of say in a way that that's what characterizes a poet's style, is how tolerant or how willing they are to let those associations, you know, stray from the previous association, you know. And so like a surrealist would have one attitude about it, and and you know, Richard Wilbur would have another attitude, you know. And it's like, it's, you know, it's all good, but it's just like you got to find your own, like you got to find your own place in that, I guess. I mean, because I guess, not to whatever get on my soapbox, but like metaphor, that's what metaphor is. It's like the association of two things that you didn't think were related until they were said that they were related, and then suddenly you can see they're related. So in a way, that's all we're doing. We're using like this sort of like mechanics of metaphor, but in a way to move through the poem, so which is beyond just simple, like not just metaphor, but it's like the metaphorical way of looking at the world. It's like, I see these two things, they might not have seemed related, I put them in there, and then you can see how they're connected. You know, that's what you all did in all your poems, you know, or that's what you do when you're making your centos, right? I mean, why do you put one line after another as opposed to another different line, right? You know, because you can feel that there's something going on there when you put them next to each other, right? So that's why I think that's what poets do, basically. So.
All right, do we have any last questions for Matthew before we let him go? Go ahead, Ethan.
So I one of the things that Holly did when we read your poems, and we also she posted your essay how to write a poem about Noguchi, and that was really cool essay. I really appreciated it, and I liked how how you got into so many different parts of the process, and how like sometimes you write felt like sometimes you end up writing a different poem than when you started to write, kind of like that. And one of the lines that I liked from there was you said that you were not ready to write this poem, and so I was wondering about that, like how do you, and then it reminded me of something that Holly said to me. She said in writing, she said the ego gets in the way. So I was wondering, like, how do you know, yeah, how do you manage that of like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write today, which poem am I ready for, and do you feel ready? I mean, yeah, I guess managing what do you think you're ready for versus what you're actually ready for, and that sort of thing, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean, it totally makes sense. And I mean, it's not going to come as any surprise. I mean, to say that, all you can do is just put yourself in the position, and then you have to just, I mean, you got to just try. And I think it's personally extremely painful to continually discover that that you can't write the poem. You're like trying to do it and you can't do it. And I guess it a little bit helps me to say to myself, oh, it's not because I suck, or like because I'm a fraud, which would be my go-to explanations for pretty much anything. But it's to say like the truth of the matter, which is that sometimes you just can't do it yet. And there may be like a psychic reason for that, or there may be like a spiritual one. Like maybe you just haven't had the experience you need to have. Like you're writing a poem, and the thing that needs to happen hasn't actually happened to you yet. And so you're kind of like in this space, but you're just like, it's not there. Like, I don't like, it hasn't happened. So you got to just put it in the drawer and wait. And maybe it'll happen in a year, maybe it'll happen in 2 years. I mean, I think I learned this honestly, like after my father died. Because I was trying to write after my dad died, and I could not even make a sentence that made any sense for like a year, at least a year, and like, I just was like hopeless. And like, so, I just couldn't do, and like, that was a very extreme example, obviously, but that was the time when I was like, oh, okay, I can't do this yet. Like, it's gotta be like some other stuff has to happen. It's not even just about time. It's like some other stuff has to happen besides that, so that I can come back to that, So I don't know if that answered, but like just a way of maybe being forgiving ourselves a little bit for not being able to make the thing the way we want it, is to say, we're just not there yet. Like, and so I say, like, my friends and I say to each other all the time with poems like that, we're like, put it in the drawer. Like literally just print it out and put it in a drawer and close the drawer. Move on to the next poem. It'll still be there. It's not going anywhere, but like, don't tinker, It's like, if it's not happening, just like, okay, come back to it week, month, year. There's some poems I come back to years later. So, I don't know if that helps at all, but like, I'm in solidarity with you because I mean, it happens to me a lot. That I'm just not there yet, so
Yeah, definitely helps a lot. Yeah, thank you very much.
I hope so. I mean, because we're all in it together.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
thanks a lot.
yeah.
In your case, Ethan, I just want to say though, I think there's a difference between not being ready to write the poem, and this is true for a bunch of you in my classes, and being too scared to write the poem. And I'm not calling you scared, Ethan. I'm not pointing at anyone. You know who you are. Sometimes you have to let yourself write about the thing you want to write about that you are avoiding because you're worried your mom's gonna read it or whatever. Well, sometimes you just have to let yourself write the poem that you are ready to write and that you're afraid to write. And I think that goes back to Matthew's first comment, which is all you can do is try. So start to try, and then if you don't succeed, then we poets, we fail and we do it again, and we fail and we do it again, and we keep writing the poem over and over again until we get the one. And then sometimes we write that same poem for years.
No,
right?
Thank you for saying that, because you're so right. You got to try. But all I'm saying is, I mean, thank you for adding that, because like, I would not want it to make it seem like But what I'm saying, I guess, is when it doesn't work, to not blame yourself. Like, oh, not have the explanation be, oh, I'm not talented enough or something, or I'm not smart enough, or whatever your particular damage is, like, that's not the explanation. Maybe the explanation is, it's tomorrow or the next day or whatever. But yeah, you're right, Holly, you got to keep coming back to it. You have to keep coming back to it. I mean, you could take a break or whatever if it's, but like, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. You got to go towards those scary things. You're right.
And I think there's this idea, like, too, in what you're saying about, like, some days you're just not as good as other days. And that doesn't mean you have to, like, tell yourself you're a shit poet now forever. Like, today you're worried about this thing or that thing, or you have too much laundry to do. And today all you can write was this one terrible line, and you can, like, beat yourself up about it. Or you can just be like, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to try again. And maybe tomorrow I'll have 2 shitty lines and that'll be better.
Well, that's so right. Because 2 things about that. So what I was saying about the accountability and the daily writing, that kind of takes a lot of that away, because you're like, oh, so I had a bad day. Like, big deal. I'm back tomorrow, and I'm back tomorrow. And I had a bad week. It doesn't matter. I'm back. So yeah, totally. And the other thing is, the great thing about being a poet is, like, a shitty line, you're just like 2 seconds away from it being an awesome line. It's not like being a novelist where you're like screwed and you work on something for like 6 months and then you're like, oh, that's wrong, or I went the wrong way. And then you're like, it's wasted work. We all know you can pull stuff out of your ass like so fast. You're just like, a terrible poem suddenly is like totally good. It just is missing 1 line or something. So that's all the more argument for what you're saying, Holly, of like, go towards the hard stuff, be willing to be like ridiculous and out of control, and like like sobbing, like mess, like messy face, like crying, like whatever, like because you're just one little like twist away from being like Cinderella.
Having worked with almost every single person in this room, most of you, or heard your work, even like some of the quiet people in the room that come to Saturday Night Special and are here listening tonight, every single person in this room has an interesting story to write a poem about. Every single one of you have interesting lives and ways of seeing the world that are totally unique to you and worth writing a poem about. There isn't a person in here that doesn't have a story that isn't worth like digging deep and writing poem after poem about. Like you don't have to be somebody special to be a poet. Like, you're all special. And I think that was evidence tonight in the readings we heard. Like, every single thing we heard tonight was fantastic. I just loved it. So
agree.
I don't want to keep keeping you so long. Any burning questions that somebody is going to be sad if they don't get to ask? Okay, it's like 100 o'clock in Texas.
If you got a burning question, ask it, and then I'll be happy to answer one more before I go put my kid in the bath. But no?
Okay, I think you're getting so much love. Don't forget to save the chat. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and you all are great poets, and lucky to have Holly, and lucky to be working with this crew and Paul and Alexandra and everybody. So I'll see you all down the road for sure.
All right. If you guys don't have Father's Day.
All right, Holly, love you. Talk to you later.
Love you. Thanks for coming and reading. All of you guys, write your little hearts out, and we will be posting some new classes for you soon in the next couple months. So you can come back and write with us some more. Meanwhile, stay in touch, write with each other. Have a good night. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Good night, Holly.
Good night, honey.
I know it's 100 o'clock where you are.
100 here.